I'm Anne Campbell, and I'm from a large family. I'm the middle child of 7 children. My parents owned and ran a business. It was a general store, and my mother did all the organising of the store, while my father delivered all the previous week's provisions that they would write the list. He would be out delivering those and she would be managing the store. And she was the buyer, but she also had all of us children and managed that as well as the... I was unaware of what my mother's modelling for me at that stage, and here I am, close on the 80, and I realise now that my mother had this, I guess it was a template for me that I didn't even know was happening. As I think about my mother, she was like the mother of the community. When there was problems, she would be there. When there was a need for a taxi, she would get hold of my father, and she really was a profound influence on my life. And her deep dependence on God's guidance. They grew up in the Methodist Church with very practical understandings of spirituality. We had 3 daughters, and when they finished school and were heading off to university, I became aware that I really was unaware of some things. My daughters would come home, and particularly one would come home and say, having been to church, well, I was invisible today. I wasn't seen, I wasn't part of the congregation. And so I thought, I need to do something. I need to try and address some of these issues if I can, but I was very unsure. In fact, I guess because I only went to Year 9, I didn't really fully grasp how important education was. I've done a lot since then. Amazingly, I found that as I look back on my life, that God was preparing me for the future, and I didn't realise it. And when my daughters were so keen to be part of the church, I just knew I needed to do something more. And I was befriended by one young woman. She was so capable, and she was encouraging me in a very subtle way. And I did a degree in counselling, and that was such a learning experience for me. And I knew that the need for women have a kind of different life experience, and their sense of spiritual yearnings, they're hungry for feminine spiritual care, which is hard to actually describe, and I'm not sure that I can. All I know is that when women came together, after we formed the Association of Adventist Women, they were so hungry for spiritual care that seemed to be missing. Mary Trim is a wonderful woman. She was one of my teachers at school in Year 7. And she was really keen. And at that time, the Association of Adventist Women were forming different chapters in the United States. And she was very keen to get a chapter started here. I knew I was not into that kind of thing. They voted me in as the vice president, and I thought, oh, what do I do now? But I had a group of wonderful young women around me, and it was just such an easy process. There wasn't any competition, it was collaboration all the time. It was in April 1986 that we started, and for the rest of the year we ran monthly programs. And fairly soon after that I realised that some of the women that would come to the programs, they had a very limited understanding of life for some. And I knew that I ought to really get a newsletter going. And so I started the newsline with the help of all sorts of capable people. And it wasn't long before we had about 500 or 600 people subscribing to our newsletter. We were running programs that were meeting the needs of women, and so I thought there needs to be more women on committees, more women, because it's a resource that God has given the church, and there's this 60% or somewhere around about that figure of our congregations are made up of women, and some of them are incredibly capable, but they also have needs. And so I was keen to have them appoint someone, and in my talking with the president, there was absolutely no budget. So what was the next thing to do? Volunteer. We had a women's advisory, and I insisted there was some capable men on that advisory, because it's the strengths of women and the strengths of men. When they're put together, we have decision-making bodies that are superior to one group or another group making decisions, because God's made us that way. When I was asked to be the Women's Ministries leader, we virtually did the same things as we had been doing in the Association of Adventist Women. And one of the things that I was very aware of was that there was no real Adventist literature about what to do if someone trusts you sufficiently to tell you what's happened to them, where they've been abused. And I thought, anyway, I discovered that there was a brochure produced in America to deal with the questions that needed to be answered. And so Carol McKean and myself, Carol Maberly, we researched the Australian figures rather than quote American figures in this brochure. And so we I guess Australianised it with the relevant research. And and one of the things that I was involved with as the Association of Adventist Women was to be on the committee that was called the Joint Churches Domestic Violence Prevention Committee. That raised the awareness of domestic violence, and at first there was horror to believe that within our own church there was domestic violence, there was sexual abuse, there was conflict management that was not very well managed. There was issues that really were waiting for women, and there were many capable women who were able to take leadership at that time. That was, I would hope, the outgrowth of us becoming able to speak up when we needed to, but to do it with grace and with tact and with enthusiasm that couldn't be subdued. And I felt that there was a real need for those voiceless people who experienced some of those things that really crush the spirituality of the weakest. And to me, that was a really important thing for us to be doing. One of the things that I felt was really important, to acknowledge that most women who were coming to our programs, we had women, some of the older women were delighted to be coming, older women who had been hungry for all these years. But there were lots of young women coming with family issues that needed to have someone who truly understood them, and to be able to find a safe place to actually disclose. But I think the church has done they've come strides ahead in those areas, whereas when we started out, it was silence. Breaking the silence was one of the things I guess we did. But I guess for me, if I were asked what I would think is really important, in the chaos of the busyness of life, it's such an important thing to have that daily relationship renewal with Christ our Saviour.